Today's daf is daf Tzadi Gimel, and we'll begin with the Mishnah on the top of Tzadi Gimel. Misha Yanasui Shalosh Nashim. Each one of three wives has a signed ksuba, and all three ksubas are signed on the same date. Later on, we'll have a discussion in a later Mishnah about different ksubas that were signed on different days. But here, all three ksubas were signed on the same day. So there are three women who are vying to collect that ksuba. And the Mishnah is now going to go through different scenarios in which there's a certain limited amount of funds in the estate of the husband who has died. Now, each one of these three women received the ksuba on a different sum, all on the same day, but on a different sum. Ksubasa shalzu mana, so that Rachel's ksuba says 100 zuz. Shalzu, the ksuba of Leah, Masayim zuz, says 200 zuz. Shalzu, and now we have Chana. Chana, the third wife, has a ksuba of shlosh mil zuz. We have 100 zuz, 200 zuz, and 300 zuz. The ain't sham el mana. However, there's only a mana. There's only 100 zuz. Now, before we see the two magical words here in the Mishnah, Cholki B'Shava, let's just add the following introduction. When there are three women vying for the ksuba, then we first isolate that amount of the ksuba, that value of the ksuba, which is common to all these women. What does that mean? When a man writes a ksuba, there's a shibud on his nechasim to pay that ksuba. And again, whether the shibud is for a mana or masayim or shlosh mils, what's common to all these three women, they all have a shibud on a mana. You know, beyond the mana, you could have a shibud to Leah and Chana, but on the mana itself, we have a shibud on Rachel, Chana, and Leah. All three are equal, and therefore the Mishnah Paskins Cholki B'Shava. On that Meah, each one of the three ladies has an equal claim. The fact that, let's say, Leah had an extra mana or Rachel had an extra 2 manos, that's irrelevant to the mana that has to be divided up. And therefore, each one of these three wives will receive a shlish, a third of a mana. Now the Mishnah goes on to a second scenario. And what that means is that if in the estate of the late husband is 200 zuz, the first 100 zuz would be divided up equally amongst all three, because they all three have a shibud on that first mana of the 200 mana. However, the Mishnah throws a curveball at us and says that Shalmana, the first lady, we called her Rachel, who has a mana, Notelas Chamishim, on that mana, which logically should have been divided up equally, shlish, shlish, shlish amongst the three women, she gets half of that mana. And we're not exactly sure why. The Gemara is going to have to raise this question. Why don't we divvy up that mana, which is half of the money that's left for the ksuba, equally amongst the three ladies? Why does the Shalmana, the first of the three wives, who called the Chana, why does she get 50% of that money? Now we get to Leah. Leah was promised Masayim. And Chana Shel Shlosh Mils was promised 300 zuz. Now, how much do we have left in the potty? We have 150 zuz, because the first wife, meaning Rachel Shalmana, she already shaved off 50 zuz. So we're left with 150 zuz of the 200 zuz. And what's going to happen is we're going to divvy up that amount of 150 zuz into two halves of 75 zuz, and both Leah and Hannah will get 75 zuz. And the reason for that is because, once again, the shibud to both Leah and Hannah on the second mana is equal, because they both have a shibud of the ksuba on that extra mana going from mana to Masayim. So that I can understand. I don't understand why in the original first mana we divide it in such a way that the balas mana gets 50%. She should be getting 1/3. So that's the Gemara. That's going to be the Sugi of Shmuel. Now we go on to another scenario. Now there are 300 zuz. Now keep in mind, once there's 300 zuz in the party, then on that third 100 zuz, right, we'll talk first about the mana and then the Masayim, but on the third Mea zuz, it's the Balas Shlosha, we call her Chana, who gets sole rights to collect that third Mea. Excuse me, because there's no shibud to Leah on the third 100. So that's clear. Now, once again, the Mishnah is very consistent. Shel mana on the first mana, the first wife, we called her Rachel, will collect Notelis Chamishim. She gets 50. That again is the unknown joker card here in this Mishnah, which we're going to have to clarify. But in any event, the Mishnah is just being consistent here. Okay, now when we shaved off 50 zuz, we're left with 250 zuz of the original 300. Shalmasayim, that's Leah, who was promised 200 zuz, mana. She gets a mana. Again, for some reason, which again, Shmuel's going to fill in that blank, she's excluded from the original mana. But what's left is her claim on the second mana. Now, the only problem is that there's also Hannah, who has rights to that second mana, because she has rights to 300 zuz, and certainly to the second mana, the second 100 zuz, she has rights. So once again, just like we saw in the earlier part of the Mishnah, that the second wife, Leah, excluded herself from getting a chelik in the first mana, here the third wife excluded herself from getting a chelik, receiving a chelik in the second mana. So the second mana now goes completely to the Shalmasayim, to Leah, the second wife. However, what we have to calculate here is that the Shalmasayim, Leah, she has to get 50 from the Rishon. And the reason for that is because she never excluded herself from the Rishon. It was the Shlishi of Shloshmeos who excluded herself from the Mana Masayim. So the Sheni now will receive 50 from the first Mana and 50 from the second Mana. On the second Mana, she, the Shniya, and the Shlishis have an equal claim. So we're going to take that second Mana and divide it into two parts. And therefore, Leah, the Shniya, Balas Masayim, she'll receive 50 from the second Mana, in addition to the 50 that she receives from the first Mana. So what are we left with now in the party? We started with 300. and we've taken off 150. So we're left with 150. Shel shlosh meos. What does she pick up? Shisha shel zav. Now, shisha shel zav is the equivalent of 150 zuz, which makes sense now because we gave 50 to the first wife, the balas mona. We gave from that original mona 50 to the second wife, the balas masayim, plus we gave her exclusive rights. No, I'm sorry. We gave her equal rights to the second mona, which will divide with the third wife. So therefore, we've taken off a mana and a half a mana, meaning 150 zuz, leaving us with 150 zuz, which is equal to shisha shel zav. And that's what the third wife is going to inherit. Now, in terms of the relationship between the zav and the dinrim or zuzim, we have to keep in mind that dinrei zav are worth 25 times a dinar kesef. So let's keep that ratio in mind. Now, the last part of this Mishnah discusses something similar to the last case, but in the case of shutfim. V'chein shalosh, meaning 3 shutfim, sheitilu lekis. So they each of these 3 put money into the potty in order to invest it in schora, and pichaso siro, either that value went down or it went up. And now they want to divvy up the shutfis, they want to break up the shutfis. Kachem cholfu. In other words, each one of the 3 will get an equal portion in the Hosiru, the Mosar, or for that matter, will suffer an equal portion of the loss. However, that's assuming that all these 3 shutfim invested the same sum of money into this schora, into this merchandise. However, if each one had a different investment, then we're going to break it up proportionally. So let's say there's a Mosar, there's Shevach, then that Shevach, that interest, those dividends will be divided up proportionally based on how much money each one of the Shutfim had invested in the Shutfim. And now we're up to the Gemara. The Gemara immediately jumps to the second part of the Mishnah, where the estate of the late husband equaled 200 zuz. Shalmana and the first of the 3 wives, they'll tell us Chamishim, she gets 50% of the first mana. Why is that so? Frankly, Gemara Talsin plus the Tilsa, she should be collecting 1/3 of a mana, which is 333 zuzim. Who the Islam. Omar Shmuel fills in the missing blank because Seves Balas Masayim Balas Mona didn't form ainly imach b'mona. This is called siluk, in which case Leah, the second wife, the Balas Masayim, she was misaleka, she removed herself. Machlok can say whether she had to write it in the shtar or not, from her chelik in the original mona, for the benefit of the Balas Mona. So this was a very fine, sterling character, act of compassion. She wanted to guarantee that she would not in any way take away from the Balas Mona vis-a-vis the Mona, because that's what's coming to the Balas Mona. And therefore, that Mona will be divided equally between Rachel and Chana, between the Balas Mona and the Balas Shalosh males. So the Balas Shalosh males will get Chamisha. So the Gemara asks the following kash on Shmuli. Hachi, Amos Seifa. Let's now learn the next case in the Mishnah. Shel Masayim v'shel Shlosh Meos. Sholosh Shel Zav, which is the equivalent of 75 dinrim. So the Gemara is asking the following kasha now. According to you, Shmuel, if the Balas Masayim, let's say, wrote a shtar to the Balas Mona, Dinu Dvarim Eli Moch, then why should the Balas Masayim collect her portion of the first Mona? Temole, the Balas Sholosh Meos, meaning the third wife we call the Chana, should be able to say to Leah, the second wife, the Balas Masayim, Hasalka Nafshach Mina. As we saw in Shmuel, you did an act of siluk, you took yourself out of the first Mana. I should therefore, meaning I, Chana, the Balas Sholosh, I should get exclusive rights in what's left in the first Mana. There's 50 Zuzim left in the first Mana after we gave 50 Zuzim to Rachel, the Balas Mana. I should get the other 50. And therefore, you should only divide up and get your chelek in the second Mana, which means that you should only get 50. Why are you getting 75? You're apparently taking and dipping into the first Mana, but you were masalik yourself from the first Mana. So what would be the counter argument on the part of the Balas Masayim against the Balas Sholosh? And the Gemara answers, Mishum di Amruleh, the Balas Masayim would argue against the argument of the Balas Sholosh. We didn't dvarm hu salki nafshay. I was only misalekes, my siluk meant that I'm not going to deal with the Balas Mana on the first Mana. But that doesn't mean that I gave up and waived my rights vis-a-vis you, the Balas Sholosh, on that first Mana. I will collect from that first Mana no less than you will collect from the first Mana, because my Shiva is equal to yours on the first Mana. I was only misalekes as atzmi vis-a-vis the Balas Meah. But I didn't give up my chelik in the Mana as a gift. I just was masalik myself. But what's left in after we give the 50, meaning after we implement the siluk of the Balas Masayim, the Balas Masayim says I have a right to get part of that too. That means that she'll get 25 from the original Mana. She'll get 50 from the second Mana, 75, which is exactly equivalent to what the Baal Sholosh will get. Because again, we're talking about a case where there's only 200 zuz in the party. Okay, now we get to the next scenario. Hayasham Sholosh Meos. So the Mishnah says if there's 300 zuz, then the Balas Mana gets 50 of the first Mana, and the Balas Masayim collects a Mana. That shaves off 150. And what we're left with is 150, and the Baal Sholosh Meos gets the 150. Meaning she gets the total third Mana, because no one else can vie and compete with on the third Mana, and she gets half of the second Mana. So the Gemara says, again, we're missing a piece of the puzzle, and we're going to have to activate Shmuel. Why? The Gemara shall Masayim Mana Shivin v'chamisha hu b'Yisla. there's no reason why Leah, the Balas Messiah, should get 100, right? Because she was Mesalekes as Atzma from the first mana. So we're left with her claim on the second mana. And on the second mana, in addition to her claim, we have the claim of the Baal Shalosh. So that second mana will be divided equally between the Baal Mosayim and the Baal Shloshmeos. In which case, the Baal Shloshmeos would get half of the second mana. One second. So how does it come out to 75? 1 second. Right, we're going to divide up the second mana. So she'll get 50 of the second mana. She was Mesalekes herself from the first mana. So now Leah and Hannah are going to divide up the balance of 250 zuz. Right. So if we divide up the balance, which is what's left in the potty is 250 zuz, after we gave 50 zuz to the balas mana, then dividing 250 in half is 75 and 75. One second. No, 1 second. I'm missing. I'm sorry. I had this, but. The Balas Mosayim will get in the Mana Sheni. Just 1 second. Again, I'm sorry, I just got stuck here for a second. Let's go back to the Mishnah for a second, make sure. Hayisham Shlosh Meos. Shalmanet Oteles Chamishim. Shalmasayim Mana. Why is she getting a mana? Let's just see. It seems, Rabbi, that the Balas Masayim gets 50 of the first mana, which I guess means that she wasn't the Salekes as Atzma vis-a-vis the Balas Shalosh. So after we shave off from the top 50 for the Balas Harishon, the Balas Mana, now the Balas Hashniya should get an equal portion in the balance up until the third Mea, which means 150 zuz. So she should be collecting 75 zuz. And yet the Mishnah says that she's collecting a full mana. I mean, we're cheating the Balas Shalosh Meos of what? of 25 zuz. Omar Shmuel, because Seves Balas Shlosh Mels Balas Masayim Balas Monah didn't dvarm Eli Mochem B'Monah. We're not going to divide up the other 50 of the Balas Rishon. We're not going to divide up the second 100 between Leah and Chana, because Chana was Misalekes Atzma from both the Monah and the Masayim. So therefore, the first Monah will be divided equally between the Balas Monah and the Balas Masayim. Then we get to the Monah Shniya, and the Balas Masayim. One second. Now I got it, because the Balas Sholosh was Misalekes es Atzma where he chose Masechet assessment from both Rachel and Leah. Again, so the Monah Rishona will divide up between Rachel and Leah. Fine, each one gets 50. Now we get to the Monah Shniya. So the Balas Monah is certainly out of the picture here. She only gets a Monah, so we're up to the second Monah. She has no Shivu. And now we divide up the second Monah equally 50-50. But why are we dividing up the second Monah 50-50 if she was Misalekes as Atzma? So I'm missing just that one point here. Why is it that the second and third wives are dividing up the second Monah equally? Monah Sheni, Notos Balas on Masayim Balas Shloshnes, Shola B'Shola. That's going to give her 50 plus 50 she got in the first Monah. She gets 100. She gets 100. And now what's left in the pot is 150, which the third wife is going to take. Yeah, Me'ach HaMisha. Okay, so there's one question I'm missing here, and I apologize. I don't understand if the Balas Shloshnos was Misalekes as Atzma to the Balas Masayim. One second. Koseves Balas Shloshnos the Balas Masayim the Balas Monah didn't. Oh, I'm sorry. Bang myself in the head here. I didn't read it properly. Sorry. The Balas Shloshnos was Misalekes as Atzma on the first Monah, not on the second Monah. Okay. Yeah, I'm going on very little sleep. So that's it. Right. Eli Mochem B'Monah. I missed the word Monah. So that after we divide up the first Monah equally between the first and the second, then we're going to divide up the second Monah equally between the second and the third, so that the second now gets 50 from the first Monah, 50 from the second Monah, totaling up 100, and the first one got 50. So out of the 300 that's left in the body, there's 150 was shaved off, and the third one gets the 150. Rav Yaakov Minar Doi Mishmei de Ravina Omar Reisha b'Shtei Tfisos v'Seifa b'Shtei Tfisos. A whole nother explanation of the Mishnah, and we're talking about grabbing onto metaltal. Now, even though metaltal of Ishtabi with ksuba, but nevertheless, if there was a tfisa on metaltalin, then you can collect from metaltalin. So during the lifetime of the father, of the husband, there was a tfisa, but there were two tfisos sequentially. Okay, now we're going to go through the entire Mishnah based on this interpretation of Rav Yaakov. Bereisha, in the first case, where there was Masayim Zuz in the party, the Balas Mana gets 50, the Balas Masayim and the Balas Shlosh Mills, each one gets 75 dinmin. That's the state Fisos, Dinoflu Shivin V'chamesh B'chad Zimna, and Me'ah V'esrim V'chamesh B'chad Zimna. So first, in the first Chalukas Metaltalin, there was 75 dinrim. So when they came to judge on these 75 dinrim that were mishubad equally to all three of them, then each one gets a shlish. So you're talking about 75 dinrim, each one gets 25 dinrim. Okay, because again, we're within the mana, we're within the range of less than the mana, shivim v'chamesh. Now we get to a case of the second tfisa, and what we're left with if we shave off 75 from the 200 is 125. Now the Balas Hamana has collected, one second, right? There was 75 on the first Fisa, the first Nefila, and she, the Balas Hamana, already collected 25 out of those 75. Oh, so if that be the case, what is she left with Hashiba going up to a Mana? Only from 75 dinrim. Only up to 75 dinrim. Now, what are we left with in the second feast? So we're left with 175. I'm sorry, 120, 125. 125. She's already gotten 25. So therefore, on the 75 dinrim that are left, no, I mean there's 125 dinrim left, but she can only get from 75 because she already collected 25 for the first visa. So she's only left with a shot at 75 out of the 125. Okay. Okay, so each one of them is going to collect 25 dinrim. So if each one collects 25 dinrim, because again, even the first Balas Mana still has rights to collect another 25 dinrim as 1/3 of this of 75, because she has up to 75. So now she has a total of 50. So what are we left with now after we shave off 50 from the 125? We're left with 75. Is that correct? So what does he write here? And so again, we divvied up 75 out of the 125. And now we're left with 50 out of the 125. So right? Because we had, so if we're left with 50, then how do we divide up that 50? Right, the Balas money gets nothing of that 50, obviously, but the Balas Masai and the Balas Sholosh Mills on that 50 have an equal shibud, because what's left is still within the purview of the scope of their of the Chov Ksuba, the Shibud Ksuba. Okay, so the Balas Hamana now gets 50. The Balas Masai and the Balas Shlosh Mills, each one gets 75. Now we go to the Sefer. The Shtei Tfisos Shenaflu Shivim v'Chamisha b'Chad Zimna and Masayim v'Esrim v'Chamisha b'Chad Zimna. So there were 300 dinrim, and they fell in 2 Tfisos, 2 Nefilos, 75 in the first, and you subtract 75 from 300, and you left with 225. And we're going to give the Balas Mona. She already collected 25 dinrim for the first Nefila. Now she has a shibud left of 75 dinrim to reach up to Mona, to 100. So we're going to divide up again 75 3 ways. So the Balas Mona will get now 50 zuz, right? Because we divide up the 75 into 3 equal parts of 25. And the Balas Masayim will collect 25 from the first Nefila. She still has a shibud after you subtract 25 from 200 of 175. And now, from what will left, she'll get her portion up to 175. Also, Moshe Naflu Nefila Shnia Shivim v'Chamisha Dinrin Kvar Cholku Bazeh. So we subtract the 75, and when we subtract the 75, we're left with 150 dinrim, and we'll divide up those 150 dinrim equally between the Balas Masai and the Balas Sholosh, because it's all within their chol. So Chamishim and Osorim Noteles Rak Balas Shlosh Meos Nimtza Shebalas Amasayim Gova Mona Balas Shlosh Meos Gova Mea V'Chamishim Din. Okay, Tanya. Now the Brisa quotes a machlokas between Rabbi Nosson and Rebbe. The Brisa says, "Zo our Mishnah is Mishnah's Rabbi Nosson. Rebbe Omer Ein ani roed dvarav shel Rabbi Nosson v'elu elacholkos b'shavet." So Rebbe denies the fundamental principle that underlies the sheet of our Mishnah, Rabbi Nosson, to say that we divide it up based on the shibud of each one, but rather cholkas b'shavet. Forget about the shibud. We're simply going to divide up the estate equally amongst the 3. So that means that even though the Baal Sholosh Meos and the Baal Masayim have a shibud, even vis-a-vis them, there's a shibud on all 300. In other words, the Balas Mea has a shibud on all of the 300, the Balas Masayim on all of the 300, and the Balas Shlosh Meos on all of the 300. Therefore, we divide it up equally. The Mishnah says, now we get to the Shufis. Omer Shmuel, Shnaim Sheitilu L'Kis, Zeh Mona V'Zeh Masayim. So even though in the investment of 300 zuz, one gave only 100 and the other gave Masayim, nevertheless, says Shmuel, on the top of Tzadi Gimel and Beis, has Charli Emtza, any increment, any profits are divided up equally. And why is that so? Because of a certain umdana. We make an umdana that even the shutaf that put in 200 zuz into the party, he will allow the other shutaf who put in only 100 zuz to divide up the profits equally. In other words, as a general rule, when the shutfim create their shutfis, the one who's giving twice that amount makes a statement, I want to get twice the amount of the profits because I put in twice the amount of the initial seed money. But here, the Baal Masayim did not make that statement, and therefore we set up an under that from the fact that he didn't make that statement, he tacitly agreed to divide up the profits equally.